I was going to go to the podium, actually.
Oh.
Pat said I could, unless you don't.
Oh, if Pat said you could, Pat is the boss. So.
What is the majority?
Sitting here, I'm not going to have to sit.
It's totally.
It might be hard to get around.
That's true for you.
Taking time.
But you have notes on an iPad, and so I realized that it's a little tricky to hold a microphone and a
Well, I guess I have no seat. That's okay. It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, right. Okay. Hold on a second, Dave. I've tried to get used to an iPad.
Say that again.
I'm just going to sit here if everybody else wants to.
Okay. Because I was going to introduce each one of you one at a time, so I'll just, not all at once. So after Sean goes, I'll introduce you, David, and so forth. Okay. All right. Oh.
So just say hello. How are you doing? I'm here for John Bidwell, and I didn't realize this was happening first, so all the better. Good to hear about this.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick Spero. I'm the Executive Officer of the American Philosophical Society, and I'm really excited for our program tonight, which is a double header. We first have the public launch of a major collaborative initiative that is going to make a major contribution to our anniversary of 1776 next year. It's going to be it's a remarkable resource, and it's called therevolutionarycity.org. You maybe have heard us talk about it various times, about this portal that we've been developing in collaboration with a number of different organizations in Philadelphia. And tonight is the public launch of this resource. And you're going to hear from each one of the contributing partners to this initiative. And then at the end, we're going to have the public revealing done by Michelle McDonald, librarian of the Society, and Bayard Miller, the head of the Center for Digital Scholarship here. So this is the launch, and I want to make clear what the launch means for the therevolutionarycity.org. It's a new beginning. It is not the mark of a completed project, but it's going to be a project that continues to grow and evolve, and not just this year and not just in 2026, but for the years to come. And I want to talk a little bit about the history of this project before we turn over to see what it's become. And this project has really been over a decade in the making. The first grant for the Revolutionary City was submitted in 2015, so that was 10 years ago. And at the time, a lot of us in Philadelphia, because we are the Revolutionary City, were thinking about 2026, but it turns out apparently not a lot of other people were. And so it took us a number of years to finally get the grant funding we needed as more and more people started thinking about what 2026 was going to mean. So in 2019, we received an Institute for Museum and Library Sciences grant, a $90,000 leadership grant. And what it was to test out this idea we had. Could a group of separate archives and libraries work together to create a unified online digital repository? And we tested that out with the HSP, with the library company, and with the APS. We proved that we could create the systems and the collaborative spirit necessary to maintain such a project. And then we received funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which really allowed us to staff up and invest in this project. And then we received funding from the Funders Collaborative that is supporting projects here in Philadelphia for 2026. And as you'll hear soon, this idea in 2015 has really evolved into a massive, large, online digital repository. And what it's done is it's broken down the barriers that were often posed to access. We now have a collection that has materials from 8 different repositories. It numbers over 50,000 pages, and anyone, anywhere in the world at any time can access this material if they want to learn more about Philadelphia and its history during the American Revolution. And as you're going to hear, just like any great library or museum, this is a digital library and museum. It has developed all this incredible interpretive material to help us learn what this archive, the stories this archive tells. So it has material for K-12, it has materials for genealogists, it has materials for scholars, and it has material for just the general interested history buff. So I'm going to turn things over now to all of those who've been a big part of this project. The first is Sean Quimby. Sean represents the University of Pennsylvania, who is part of that first grant in 2015. He's the Associate Vice Provost and Director of the Kislak Center for Special Collections and Rare Books and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania. He's going to talk a little bit about what's going on at Penn, but also how this project, how they've contributed to it.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Pat. You can hear me, right? Okay, awesome. All right, so the Kislak Center is Penn's primary repository for rare materials. With our colleagues at the McNeil Center for Early American History, we've been organizing the entire Penn campus around America 250, exhibitions, programs, etc. But as members of the Revolutionary City Collaborative, we've had the honor of coordinating programming, specifically an exhibition with APS. And this past spring, we opened Revolution at Penn. The exhibition takes a close look at how the young educational institution that we now know as Penn, located in the revolutionary city of Philadelphia, navigated upheaval and tumult of war and independence, all the while confronting debates around the role, purpose, and control of higher education, debates that persist to this day. So we'll take you into the exhibition briefly. The culmination of decades of research, in particular by Jim Duffin, but also John Pollock, his co-curator, the exhibition features items such as Franklin's proposals on the education of youth in Pennsylvania, the 1755 charter that established Penn, and a detailed map showing Penn's location and the residence of all of its founders, residences of each of its founders, as well as findings from the Penn and Slavery Project and much more. This is the interior of the gallery on the 6th floor of Van Pelt Library. But outside the library, we have a coffee house. Coffee houses were sites of news sharing and debate in early Philadelphia, so we constructed a replica at the entrance of the gallery so that visitors experience the very kind of space where the issues of the day were debated as they enter into the space, the gallery. We even served actual coffee there for a program that marked the launch of Michelle's book, Coffee Nation, an excellent read. And I'm happy to share that the exhibition has actually been continued through early September, and that Penn's president, Larry Jameson, has selected it for the Penn Reading Project, which means that every incoming Penn student will spend time visiting and thinking about the exhibition, a kind of shared intellectual experience. We've also been eager contributors to the Revolutionary City web portal, contributing items such as trustee minutes, a bound archive of documents relating to the participation of German soldiers in the Revolution, and several items from the Arnold and Deanne Kaplan collection of early American Judaica. Here you see a manuscript almanac written in Hebrew, created by a man named Abraham Cohen, that spans the year 1778 to 1779. The almanac was begun here in Philadelphia, but finished in Lancaster, where Cohen fled during the British occupation. It and all of the contributions from the Kaplan collection stand as evidence of the role that Jews played in the revolutionary city. We've also contributed by digitizing material from the city archives and adding more of our own collection material. Here you see the most recent addition to our Franklin papers. This is a 1749 letter from Franklin to his friend William Strahan that references his, quote, new public affair, by which he means the University of Pennsylvania. Scholars have confirmed that this was Franklin's earliest reference to what would become Penn, and it was acquired at auction earlier this year with support from donors. And you will see it in the Revolutionary City portal shortly. The last thing I want to do is call your attention to the America 250 at Penn webpage. This lists events across the university as they take shape, and credit to Lynn Farrington, who's sort of leading that Herculean effort. Next spring, we'll be opening an exhibition called The Time to Right All Wrongs, France, Haiti, and Philadelphia in a Revolutionary Age. That's in direct conversation with the exhibition at MOAR. And we'll be hosting a scholarly conference with the McNeil Center to complement that. And then the last event that I'll call your attention to, just because it's so exciting, is the Common Press, which is Penn's letterpress studio. we'll be hosting a series of workshops that culminates in a real-time composing, setting, and printing of the Declaration of Independence on paper made from linen and cotton rags that participants have gathered through the city during the year. So with that, I encourage you to check out the website. The QR code should lead you to it. I want to thank Pat and our colleagues at APS and in the collaborative for the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Sean. David Brigham. David Brigham, President and CEO of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. Don't you also have librarian in your title?
I do, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. We are proud partners of this portal, and like Patrick, we have a wide array of exhibitions and programs, which you can find on our website, so I'm not going to spend time on that this evening. What excites me about the portal is the variety of different kinds of documents, different media, different stories, different sectors of the population, different political perspectives that we're able to represent collectively. So here's a pair of documents from the Stamp Act crisis that show economic protest. They also show women business leaders who participated in that resistance to the stamp tax. Of course, our proof copy of the Declaration, once you declare independence, you need an army and you need a government. So here's George Washington writing to his confidant, John Cadwalader, the day after the Second Battle of Trenton, in which on the second page at the bottom, he enumerates by rank the 919 Hessians and soldiers that he captured at Trenton. This is a remarkable broadside from 1777 in which the writer reminds the reader that the British have promised freedom to all African-American enslaved people who enlist with the British Army. He notes that there are a handful of black soldiers in the continental effort as well, but as yet, that liberty has not been promised to them. And he enumerates the moral and political consequences of that lapse. Among the Loyalist documents that we have and supplied to the website are the wonderful Elizabeth Drinker diaries. And on April 5th, in this entry, she and a delegation of women have gone to visit George and Martha Washington in his tent, in their tent at Valley Forge, to plead for the liberation of their husbands, sons, loved ones who have been exiled to Virginia for their perceived loyalism and potential dissension in the effort that, that Washington and his army are fighting for. And on the right, a catalog of books, titles, and a list of actors who participated in the Meschianza in the spring of 1778 in celebration of the British Army, the occupying force. And there was a big party in Philadelphia, and these are we think, young ladies who participated in interpreting popular and great works of literature. So in the middle, for example, is a performance, an interpretation of Love's Labour's Lost. So it's just a wonderful, little cultural nugget, and demonstrates the participation, again, from different perspectives throughout the Revolutionary War and the context in which they were operating and living.
Great, thank you, David. I think that's a great sample of some of the incredible stories that are embedded in Revolutionary City. Next up is John Van Horne, who's the director of the Library Company of Philadelphia. And like the HSP in Penn, the Library Company was part of that initial grant in 2015, and it shows the dedication and determination we all had to see this through. John, do you want to go?
Yep, thanks, Pat. So we too, the Library Company, are proud to be a partner in the Rev City project. We've contributed many hundreds of items to the portal, and many of them are going to be featured in our exhibition next year. We're actually doing 2 exhibitions over the course of the semi-quincentennial. This fall, we have one opening on the 250th anniversary of the Navy and Marines. It'll focus on the peacetime activities of the Navy from the very beginning up to 1939. But our major exhibition will be next year, called Archiving the Revolution, which will display a huge collection of a variety of printed materials, broadsides, pamphlets, handbills, prints, maps, etc. They document the daily life of Philadelphia during the Revolution. It's going to touch on a number of major topics from 1764 to 1788, beginning with the Paxton Massacre, following through with the Stamp Act, the founding of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, the publication of Paine's Common Sense, the Declaration, the Constitution, celebrating ratification in 1788 with the Grand Federal Procession. Much of this material comes from one source. We have an amazing collection established by a crazy, eccentric Swiss character named Pierre-Eugène du Cimetière. He lived in Philadelphia from 1764 till the time of his death 20 years later. And he was very ambitious, and he was going to write a huge history of the political and natural history of North America. And he went around gathering up lots of primary materials. And during the Revolution, he went out and gathered up all kinds of fugitive pieces, these handbills and proclamations and pamphlets, things that were handed out on the street or posted in taverns that were not meant to last for the ages, but he managed to scoop up hundreds of them. And because of his obsessive collecting, we now have many unique copies of some of these works that don't otherwise survive. So we're going to be featuring them as well as a lot of other material in our exhibition. And I just want to show you three sort of representative examples of the kind of things that will be in the show. This is a Franklin political cartoon from the time of the Stamp Act, where Franklin tries to show the sorry state of the British Empire if they enact the Stamp Act, with the colonies on the extremities that have now been severed. No copies of Franklin's cartoon exist, but du Cimetière somehow got a hold of it and made his own replica of it in his own hand. Oops, did I go backwards? Yeah, David mentioned the Meschianza. We have a huge collection of materials, many of which will be in the exhibition, and this was the big party that the British officers threw for themselves at the end of the occupation when they were about to depart Philadelphia. And we have drawings that show some of the ladies' garments. We have actual fabric samples from some of their dresses, and we have a ticket. And it was quite the amazing occasion, and it's well documented in our collections and also in the portal. And then finally, this is the only existing copy of a broadside that was printed when news first arrived from London of the terms of the treaty ending the Revolutionary War. This Philadelphia printer Oswald got hold of it and immediately went to press and distributed this sort of the late breaking news. And this copy we actually acquired more recently, but so just a sample of what we've got, and we're looking forward to cooperating with all of our partners on various programming next year and having a great celebration. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. And next up is Matthew Skick, the Director of Collections and Exhibitions at the Museum of the American Revolution.
Thank you, Patrick. And we at the Museum of the American Revolution are gearing up to open up an exhibit that is showcasing the strength of this collaborative and the archival collections here in Philadelphia. This exhibit is called The Declaration's Journey, that explores the 250-year global impact of the Declaration of Independence, and also how international independence movements and rights movements have encouraged the United States to re-examine and rethink its own relationship with its founding document and founding ideals. And the exhibition begins with a really thought-provoking pairing of objects, one of which is probably familiar to many of you. On loan from the American Philosophical Society will be the Windsor chair. That is the one that is believed to have been used by Thomas Jefferson when drafting the Declaration of Independence here in Philadelphia. But that's paired with the steel prison bench from Martin Luther King's prison cell, where he's imprisoned in April of 1963, the place where he wrote the letter from Birmingham jail, in which he references the Declaration of Independence. So two incredible objects to start this exhibit, but also to show our visitors that this exhibit is not just about 1776, but how the kind of the long legacy of 1776 into the 20th century and the 21st century. And the exhibit will explore the first travels of the Declaration of Independence. We'll have a great collection of first printings, first responses to the Declaration of Independence, Black abolitionists who are using the language of the Declaration of Independence to promote their efforts and causes in the late 18th century. But then we'll go into the age of revolutions, exploring revolutions in France, Haiti, Mexico, Hungary, and other parts of the world. We'll return to the United States, thinking about the antebellum and Civil War eras in which the Declaration of Independence becomes a divided ground in a way, and used by sides for abolition, for unity, but also for secession. In the fourth section of the exhibition, we'll bring visitors into the 20th century, examining independence movements in India, Ireland, Czechoslovakia, Korea, and bringing documents, including examples of international declarations of independence, and then material culture related to those declarations on view, including, you see on screen here, a tabletop spinning wheel, or a charkha, that was given by Mahatma Gandhi to one of his supporters, and this will be on loan to the exhibition, as well as a commemorative copy of the Indian Declaration of Independence. We'll also explore the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Eleanor Roosevelt's involvement in drafting that. And we'll bring the story back to 1963 with the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and one of the most famous uses of the language of the Declaration of Independence in Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. So this is a wide-ranging exhibition, but again, something that brings together materials from Philadelphia institutions and institutions across this country, over 100 objects, works of art, documents on display from over 50 lenders, from the UK, Mexico, Chile, and so it's a really exciting opportunity to be a place to examine Philadelphia's greatest export, the Declaration of Independence.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. And before I turn things over to the big reveal and the launch, I just want to first off acknowledge that we have representatives from many of the chief partners here tonight, but really this collaborative effort required a lot of staff being involved, and some of whom I see out in the audience today who've supported it in one form or another, and I think I want to acknowledge all of them. People have come, people have gone, some have left and come back. And I also I want to acknowledge Bob Hauser, who's the executive officer of the APS during the initial funding for this project. So thank you all that are here with us. Now, this is an innovative project, and I want to emphasize that this is just the launch. It is not the end of the project. You're going to hear about the incredible work that's being done and is going to continue to be done. This is, in many ways, one of the infrastructure projects for 2026. In 1976, there were buildings and museums built here in Philadelphia, but in the 21st century, in this digital world that we live in, this is going to be one of the major projects that is going to last, it's a legacy project that's going to last well beyond 2026. Michelle, you want to take it over?
Sure. I'm ably assisted here by Bayard Miller, who is our Associate Director for Technology and Digital Initiatives Scholarship. One of those? Okay, good. All right. So we are going to, in just a moment, officially launch Revolutionary City. But before we do so, we wanted to give you a bit of background. You have heard from all of our partners about the innovative programming and exhibitions that they're doing. One of the real treasures of the Revolutionary City Collaborative is not just the online portal, though that is what we're celebrating tonight. It is the collaboration between all of us. Each one of us has taken a different lens or perspective on 2026, on the semi-quincentennial, on the Declaration of Independence. And so consequently, we are stronger collectively than we are individually. And that was ultimately the goal for Revolutionary City. Our Revolutionary City journey began this year with our museum exhibition, Philadelphia, the Revolutionary City. And it is itself already a testament to what we can do when we work together. Unlike most APS exhibitions, this exhibition draws on the collections of all of the institutions represented here, as well as nearly a dozen others, to show not just what the Revolutionary City looked like to the names and the people and the events with which you might be familiar, but what it meant to people on the ground, what it meant to tradespeople whose business was disrupted, what it meant to those Quaker wives whose husbands were arrested, what it meant to enslaved and indentured people who were fighting for freedom at the same time and trying to use that same language, but not always as successfully. What it meant not only to our military leaders, but to the common soldier. What it meant to those who were fighting for ways to buy their groceries as the prices of everything went up. The Revolutionary City touched all aspects of life, and if you haven't had a chance to see it, it's open until December 28th. Coming up next year will be These Truths, the Declarations of Independence. And this draws exclusively on the APS's collection of declarations, which is among one of the best in the nation. And indeed, I suspect some of them will be represented in our featured presentation this evening. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about those now. What we do want to focus on is the portal. Here's what we recognized when we began this journey. All of these institutions have remarkable collections, all of them. But primarily our audience has been researchers or scholars who come to our repositories to further their knowledge and by extension their students and the public's knowledge about what we have on offer. The Revolutionary City portal offers something more, for more people and about more subjects than what is normally associated with this military episode. That's the power of collectivity. That being said, just digitizing our objects wouldn't be sufficient to reach those audiences. And so what you see when you go to the portal now are pathways to help different groups of people find what they need. Curricular materials for teachers, interactives and digital initiatives for students, and a tremendous way of searching the portal, multiple ways of searching the portal for interested members of the public, looking for specific episodes in neighborhoods, specific families, different kinds of institutions. And so I think I have one more slide that shows some of this digital storytelling. I chose this particular episode, which is a series of correspondence by different Quaker young girls, actually, 14 to 16, who are keeping in touch with each other during the Revolutionary War. And it's an important example because it demonstrates that the war isn't just fought on a military front. It's something that touches everybody who experiences it. And so with that, I believe I'm going to turn it over to Bayard to actually show you what the portal looks like in action.
Maybe. Great. Thanks, Michelle. Can you all hear me? Cool. Here we go. So, like Michelle said, we've been creating pathways into these documents. It's not good enough just to put the documents out there. We got to show people what to do with them. So what you're looking at here is a exact representation of Philadelphia on the ground in the late 18th century. Not really, but this is all the correspondence networked in the Revolutionary City portal. What we've been doing with this project is digitizing materials and also enhancing the metadata. We've been trying to pull out different voices, different names, so that we could tell different stories of revolution to show what it actually looked like on the ground here in the city. Bear with me. Great. So it's all about the documents, though, right? There we go. Great. So from this network visualization, You click on this and you get all the correspondence written to or from each individual person. So it's a really great way to see the connectivity in the portal. We also, like I said, it's all about the names. So far, to this date, we've got over 2,400 names that we pulled out of over 57,000 pages of manuscript documents from 6,360 letters as of today. I like to point out the Byards in this. There's 3 Byards in this portal, so you should go check them out after this. Also, geographic location is very important. It's really hard. One of the main things that we were asked to do when this project started was to figure out how to visualize this, how to map the revolutionary city, which is very hard because a lot of these documents, they don't have address information on them. So we painstakingly sometimes go through and find things. So for example, if you go to here, you click on Northern Liberties, you can see all the documents, broadsides, anything that was written, printed, anything from Northern Liberties, right over there, Philadelphia. So what we're most excited about, though, is transcription. That was actually the main thing that we were asked to do is how do we do transcription, right? Today we have a problem where people aren't learning how to read cursive handwriting. It's very difficult. It's also very difficult for us to transcribe every single document. So what we did was dedicate ourselves to coming up with a handwritten text recognition, handwritten text recognition, yeah, that's right, yeah, it's hard to say. Automatic transcription tool that will automatically transcribe every document in the portal. So, so far we've got 96,000 transcribed lines that were done by staff internally here at the Center for Digital Scholarship and the Museum Education team, and also volunteers at all sorts of different workshops. So, without further ado, you can search for names. So here, this one right here, great. So, this looks like an ordinary document, but for those of you who can see here, click here, and then the transcription is there like that. So all the documents go through this process, and then eventually we'll be able to run these models over the entire portal, and then everything will be infinitely more accessible. This is going to give unprecedented access to these materials like we've never seen before in Philadelphia. It's really exciting. This one, we have to point out, because it's a staff favorite, this is from Quaker women. We have a lot of stories of Quaker women, girls really, young women in the portal. It's just normal everyday life on the ground of the revolution, but there's a lot of shade that they throw at one another in here. So you can see here that Polly Fishbourne as it says here, is not a girl of her worth. Hold on, guys. See, live demos never work, but we try. She's not proved as a girl of her worth, but give my love to her in your necks and tell her I remember her, though she has forgotten me. Anyway, so it's lots of different stories like this. This is what we're trying to tell. There's so many out there. Again, like Pat said, thanks to the staff here internally, Center for Digital Scholarship, the museum education team worked really, really hard to get this on the ground. It's a pretty exciting day to get it out there to you all. We'll end here. Michelle?
All right. Oh, sorry. So this one I am going to stand up so I can take a look at it. So we also wanted to emphasize that the portal, as has already been mentioned, is continuing to grow. This particular document joined the portal this morning. It was a document that we acquired just a couple of weeks ago. And the reason we enjoyed it so much, this is from the fall of 1775, and it was published by J. Humphreys, Jr. Who was a loyalist printer here in Philadelphia. He was reporting that the king had issued a proclamation for suppressing rebellion and sedition in the colonies. There have been, this proclamation was published throughout the colonies, and there are some extant examples from Massachusetts and from New York, but this is the first example we have for Pennsylvania. It is the only known copy for Pennsylvania, and it was previously in private hands until the APS acquired it, and the gentleman who helped us do so is in the audience tonight, who acquired it. And the reason we like it so much is because in response to this proclamation, Congress issued their own proclamation back explaining why the colonies had taken this stance. This document from December 6, 1775, we already owned. What we didn't have was what it was in response to. And now we do, and those two documents will be a primary feature of next year's exhibition about the Declarations of Independence. And so, Without further ado, because I realize we have just crossed that 6 o'clock mark, I would like to declare the Revolutionary City portal open to the public. And now I will very nicely and hopefully not very awkwardly welcome these gentlemen down to the on the stage and get us ready for the next portion of this evening. Okay, great. Thank you, Byron. So, changing hats. Hi, my name is Michelle McDonald, and I'm the director of the Library and Museum here at the American Philosophical Society. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's discussion of John Bidwell's The Declaration in Script and Print, A Visual History of America's Founding Document, which was published, timely enough, on July 4th of last year. It is an especially important talk given the formal launch that you just witnessed of the Revolutionary City portal, as in this volume, Bidwell explores what is perhaps the single most important founding document of the United States of America, which became both a work of art and a mass market commodity during the 19th century. Bidwell's work draws on a comprehensive checklist of nearly 200 prints and broadsides drawn from various collections, and I'm sure that we will all learn a tremendous amount about the fascinating history of these material, textual, and visual representations of America's public changing attitudes toward this iconic text. John Bidwell is the Curator Emeritus of the Morgan Library and Museum, an independent research library based in New York City. Before that, he was the Curator of Graphic Arts at the Princeton University Library, and he has written extensively on the history of papermaking in England and in America, including Graphic Passion, Matisse and the Book Arts, which was published by Penn State Press, the same publisher of the volume you will be hearing about this evening. His work has been supported by the American Antiquarian Society and the American Society for 18th Century Studies. Please join me in welcoming John to the podium.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, clicker.
Otherwise, it's not going to be a very visual presentation.
There we go.
Actually have the visuals.
Gotcha. It's been a treat to hear about the semi-quincentennial projects for the Revolutionary City. Those of you who may have been around for the Library Company of Philadelphia 250th anniversary festivities will know that quarto millenary is easier to pronounce. Other revolutionary cities could learn from your example, although you've had the advantage of being almost always in walking distance, living in Princeton. I've had the good fortune to take the train here and walk from one research destination to the next, a pleasure every step of the way. Now's the time for some payback. During the 19th century, Americans learned to love the Declaration. They cherished it as a relic of the Revolution, the birthright of the nation, a charter of liberty and freedom. Artists, printers, and publishers gave them what they wanted: engravings, lithographs, and letterpress broadsides adorned with patriotic emblems intended to evoke the moral values and the real presence of the Founding Fathers. This urge to embellish the text reached a peak during the centennial. I've been studying how that style developed and why it fell out of favor. To that end, I've examined about 200 editions dating from 1816 to 1900, a sample large enough to track changes in tastes and trends in the trade. John Binns, a Philadelphia newspaper publisher, was the first to sell the Declaration as a work of art. In March and June 1816, he issued subscription proposals for a large pictorial engraving containing a calligraphic text, facsimile signatures, portraits of Washington, Jefferson, and Hancock, allegories of victory and prosperity, and a symbolic border of state seals he called a cordon of honor. It would cost $10 plain, $13 colored. By the end of the year, his proposals had appeared in nearly 80 newspapers throughout the United States. His saturation advertising played a part in alerting Americans to the historical importance and emotional impact of the engrossed parchment. He claimed to have spared no expense to evoke its meaning and achievements. He spent years researching the correct imagery for the state seals, some available only in crude wax impressions. APS gave him permission to use its Gilbert Stuart painting for the Washington portrait. His print was so ambitious, so rich in detail, portraits, emblems, and ornament, that he hired 5 artists to deal with different portions of the design. Some artists fell behind, others quit and had to be replaced. Delayed but undaunted, Binns distributed proofs to newspapers and obtained glowing reviews to entice the public and prove that the project was still underway. But other printmakers poached the customers he had been prepping and flooded the market with cheap imitations before he could finish his magnum opus. William Woodruff, a journeyman employed by one of his engravers, stole his concept and produced a smaller version priced as low as $4. Binns sued him and obtained an injunction but lost his case when a judge ruled that the copyright laws did not apply to publishers. Woodruff failed to profit from this legal loophole and defaulted on his debts a year later. This is the only copy I can find of its print in its first state. I believe the first state was a failure because the renegade engraver rushed it out before he could render the signatures in facsimile. Instead, he had to make do with the names written out in the same hand as the text. Desperate, one step ahead of his creditors, he sold or surrendered the plate to other printmakers who improved the artwork and supplied the coveted facsimiles. This late state of the print could be bought in New York City for 50 cents. Woodruff was bad enough, but even worse was the writing master Benjamin Owen Tyler. He too succeeded in overtaking and underselling Binns before the $10 print could be completed. Binns accused him of plagiarizing his prospectus. The writing master replied by impugning the honesty, patriotism, and politics of his opponent, an Irish immigrant and a firebrand Republican. Newspapers took sides, all the better to publicize the competing prints. Tyler and his allies detected a political bias in Binns's choice of portraits, John Adams conspicuous by his absence, a deliberate affront to the Federalists. In contrast, the rival print let the text speak for itself in an elegant round hand interspersed with ornamental scripts. If neutral in its politics, it was an outright commercial venture and a means of self-promotion. Tyler used it to display his skills in lettering and advertise a course in penmanship he was teaching in Washington, D.C. The schoolmaster launched a subscription campaign for his declaration, beginning with big names like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, John Quincy Adams, John C. Calhoun, and Henry Clay. There they are on the first page of his subscription book, followed by lesser names of customers he recruited on sales trips from Richmond, Virginia to Bangor, Maine. He claimed to have sold more than 3,000 copies. Pathologically ambitious, he embarked on other printmaking projects in hopes of getting his piece of the political pie, a handout, a commission, a patronage appointment. He published inspirational letters of Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson, sycophantic portraits of John Adams and Henry Clay, a campaign poster for the Whig ticket in the 1840 election. These ingratiating print ventures were ignored. Clay denied him a job in his department. Adams rebuffed him. Waiting for the big break that never came, Tyler sold lottery tickets and varnished iron sidings for a living. Reduced to penury and drunkenness, he died indigent in the New York City almshouse in 1858. Likewise, Binns failed to profit from the Declaration despite repeated attempts to sell it to people in power. To prime the pump, he gave copies to both houses of Congress with the understanding that they would be displayed prominently as if to inspire the lawmakers' deliberations. What became of the Senate's copy, I do not know, but the House's copy still survives in its magnificent frame and in its designated place. That I can say on the authority of Samuel F.B. Morse's painting of the chamber, where you can see it near the Speaker's rostrum. After the House moved to larger quarters, that space became the National Statuary Hall. You can still see the print amidst the statues. A prop manager hired by Steven Spielberg knew about this frame and commissioned a replica of it for Spielberg's movie Amistad, starring Anthony Hopkins in the part of John Quincy Adams. There you see Adams contemplating the Declaration, a rhetorical prop he used to plead for African captives in the case United States versus the Amistad. He gestured to it several times during his arguments before the Supreme Court, nearly 9 hours altogether during 2 court sessions in 1841. The prop manager tried to recreate the Supreme Court chamber and found a declaration that might have been there at that time, a lithograph printed in France for export to America. The real John Quincy Adams would have had mixed feelings about the lithograph, which was a piracy of the Woodruff piracy of the Binns artistic interpretation. Adams detested Binns, an infamous man who could be bought and sold for the price of a government contract. He could not forgive the omission of his father's portrait in the subsequent dispute that tainted a precious document with political invective. The newspaper announcement that the upstart was giving copies to Congress must have seemed at best a publicity stunt, at worst a ploy for patronage. A few days later, Adams asked Tyler to make an exact replica of the document, no calligraphic flourishes, but rather a scrupulously accurate surrogate of the original. Even then, the original was in poor condition, which went from bad to worse when Binns's engraver damaged the signatures. Something had to be done to stop that man and ensure the future of the document. Then, serving as Secretary of State, Adams took it upon himself to make an official facsimile sponsored by his department and approved by Congress. Tyler was too expensive, so he hired William J. Stone, an expert engraver who had already done business with government agencies. Under the Secretary's exacting supervision, Stone spent 3 years striving for the utmost accuracy in the rendition of the text and signatures. The State Department requisitioned 200 copies printed on vellum for publication on July 4th, 1823. You can just barely see the date and Adams's name in the unobtrusive imprint at the top. Compare that to Binns's credentials and Tyler's affidavit, both certified with official signatures and Tyler's with a departmental seal. Both were more impressive than the State Department imprint. With these assurances, devotees of the Declaration did not demand the more accurate reproduction, which was not available even if they had wanted it. Congress drew up a distribution list limited to government offices and office holders, along with the living signers and Lafayette. More about Lafayette in a moment. The governor of Pennsylvania received 6 copies, including one designated for the Philosophical Society. For some reason, that copy did not arrive, and the Society's secretary solicited another one from Secretary of State Daniel Webster, who donated his personal copy, a later impression on paper. These paper copies are thought to be proofs, wrongly in my opinion. Research by David Gary and the APS Conservation Department show that Stone's plate went back to his press under strictly controlled circumstances. The State Department facsimile was government property, a limited edition not available to members of the trade. Printmakers looked elsewhere for the signatures and found them in the certified, authentic Binns and Tyler engravings. Facsimile signatures derived from those 2 engravings appear in more than 90 prints during the 19th century. The chain of transmission could take twists and turns from one medium to another, expedited by improved printing technologies. This one came from a book illustration in the 1850s, which came from another one in the 1830s, which was based on Binns. Even more complicated is the route taken by Tyler's signatures to this large lithograph of Jefferson's rough draft. I know of at least 2 intermediate steps, a folding plate in a history book and a 2-page spread in Harper's Weekly. The rough draft has its own history of facsimile reproductions, some of which feature Jefferson's condemnation of the slave trade. Congress deleted that clause to appease the Southern delegates. I think it's no coincidence that it reappears in facsimile publications just before and during the Civil War, often accompanied with the signatures. A delightful solecism, suggesting that the Southern delegates had suddenly come to their senses and rushed up to sign the document before the fair copy could be prepared. Strange to say, Tyler's signatures are still in circulation, although 2 names are misspelled after being corrupted in transmission 4 times removed from the original. Letterpress printers copied the decorative schemes in Binns's and Tyler's engravings. Like Binns, these printers framed the text in a symbolic border with patriotic attributes. Like Tyler, they emulated the handwriting of the original and embellished it with decorative types. Letterpress broadsides were cheaper than intaglio engravings. This one was a freebie distributed at an Independence Day parade in 1828. Members of the Baltimore Typographical Association printed it on a press they had installed on a float, a vehicle festooned with muslin and decorated with paintings of statesmen and military heroes. Apprentice boys played the part of Mercury, the patron deity of the printing profession. Dressed in flesh-colored tights, the Mercuries each held a caduceus, a pole by which they conveyed the freshly printed broadsides to the spectators. So far, I've located only 2 copies, both annotated with accounts of the parade, as if that was the only reason for retaining them. The engravings looked valuable, less so the letterpress broadsides. This one was priced at 12.5 cents. The printers of the Boston Buick Company used stock cuts to replicate Binz's state seals and display types to imitate Tyler's calligraphic lettering. Somehow they had seen Tyler's print, or maybe even owned a copy, for his subscription book records more than 100 sales in Boston. He charged $5. They brought the price down to $0.125, seeking a large mass market for their wares. They sold stereotype plates to New York printers who used the state seal's design in at least 2 editions. I hope I've made it clear how these cheap imitations help to popularize the Declaration and keep it in the public eye. They might be tacked to a wall or passed from hand to hand. Some were backed and varnished so they could be rolled up on spindles. The more ambitious prints were framed for display in homes and public places. Picture framers stocked them for sale to walk-in customers who might buy them on a patriotic impulse. In one form or another, the decorated text was everywhere. John Trumbull painted the text in action, the solemn moment when Jefferson presented it to the President of Congress. For the astounding sum of $32,000, the government had hired Trumbull to paint 4 scenes of the Revolution for display in the Capitol Rotunda. The first and foremost would be a life-size Declaration of Independence, a subject the painter promised to render with the utmost accuracy. He made 36 portraits from life and scrupulously omitted those whose likenesses could not be found. He consulted with Jefferson, who obligingly drew a floor plan of Independence Hall. Later, he learned that he had been misled by Jefferson, that he had misdated the painting July 4th, that he had conflated the proceedings on different days, that he had included congressmen present on one day or another, but not on July 4th. One critic called it a sorry, motley mongrel picture where truth and fiction mingle. Despite those defects, it inspired a surge of patriotic sentiment in Americans who flocked to see it for themselves. Before installing it in the Rotunda, Trumbull took it on tour in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and Baltimore. He estimated that 21,000 had viewed it and paid more than $4,000 in admissions fees. He needed the money, too often living beyond his means and only rarely winning commissions as lucrative as the Rotunda Declaration. He hoped to supplement his income by publishing a print version of the painting. Visitors to the exhibition could pick up a later version of this brochure, a guide to the painting on one side, proposals for a print version on the other. Subscribers were to pay $10 down, $10 on delivery. At first, he intended to have the engraving done in England, where he could count on quality, but then decided that would be too expensive, if not cause for complaint, that foreigners had been meddling with the Declaration. He awarded the commission to the New Yorker Asher B. Durand, then at the age of 24, a promising artist previously employed in reproductive illustrations and the banknote business. It took him 3 years to complete the print a delay agonizing to Trumbull, who depended on the subscriptions to restore his fortune. $20 was beyond the means of most Americans. Besides, they'd been buying the Binns print for $10, Tyler's for $5, and the letterpress throwaways priced in pennies. He vented his frustration in letters to his Federalist friends in Congress. Binns's print was as repugnant as his politics. "How is it, my dear sir," he wrote indignantly, "that an Irish immigrant can obtain patronage for such a work, Gothic at best, when an old officer cannot obtain it for a work which I will proudly say will do honor to the nation in the eyes of the civilized world?" In another letter, he compared the irksome print to the Christmas specimens of children at a writing school. But he did not entirely disdain the vagaries of the marketplace and took a cue from his competitors when he started selling his work in 1823. He sold it with a companion print, a numbered key identifying the portraits with facsimile signatures, by then a mainstay in the declaration business. I believe the key was an afterthought, a graphic accessory designed to capitalize on the craze for facsimiles. I've seen one copy in a contemporary gilt frame hung by two metal chains beneath the Durand engraving in a matching frame. That way it was kept in a discreet distance, a useful adjunct, but not to be confused with the main performance. The key sometimes took on a meaning of its own in relation to the engraving. Remember that Congress gave 2 copies of the State Department facsimile to the Marquis de Lafayette. Lafayette displayed one of them in his bedroom, along with a bust of Washington, a print of the farewell address, the text of the Constitution, and a Trumbull print depicting the battle at Bunker's Hill. He also owned a copy of Trumbull's declaration, which apparently was too large to fit in this room stocked with so many American mementos. Instead, he squeezed the key in a space between the door and the ceiling. Lafayette's self-congratulatory iconographic scheme sidelined the portraits and prioritized the text, the gift of a grateful nation and a reminder of his role in writing another declaration. Linking one revolution to another, a copy of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen was also on display. Jefferson bought from Trumbull 2 copies of the engraving accompanied with the key. Both were framed, and one was hung above the fireplace in the entrance hall of Monticello. Like Lafayette's bedroom, the entrance hall recounted the collector's accomplishments, an autobiographical exhibition. Here, too, the collector had to cope with space limitations. There was no room for the key above the fireplace, which was just as well because it would have detracted from the drama of the engraved declaration. By keeping it out of sight, Jefferson could explicate the scene to his guests and take it upon himself to identify the portraits. When a visitor asked what he felt when he stood before Congress on that day, he replied, "Pretty much as you may imagine, with a halter around his neck to be hung, for such, doubtless, would have been my fate, and that too of all who signed this instrument had we been taken by the British." Take it or leave it, the key helped to popularize Trumbull's portraits. They illustrate the text and accompany the signatures in at least 40 prints. Here, an eclectic artist used the key to combine the portraits and the text inside a frame with the presidents on top and the state seals along the side. Engraved on steel, this print was produced in quantity and was updated over the years with additional presidents and state seals. The reworked plate started with 26 state seals in 1838 and ended up with 34 in the 1860s. During the centennial, the iconic image could be seen in fairground souvenirs, keepsake calling cards, and color-printed cotton handkerchiefs. During the bicentennial, it extended across a block of commemorative stamps and occupied the back of the $2 bill, although the designers could fit it in that space only by lopping off congressmen left and right. Now you can buy collectibles online, such as plates, pictures, creamers, wall plaques, medals, calendars, postcards, jigsaw puzzles, and framed giclée reproductions on canvas. Declaration publishers often resorted to gimmicks and graphic novelties. A doctor by profession, R. Morris Swander developed a sideline and trompe-l'oeil calligraphic portraits drawn with a steel pen and printed by lithography. Swander learned how to modulate the thicks and thins of letters in ways that would depict Washington and Lincoln within the texts of the Declaration and the Emancipation Proclamation. Up close, you could read the documents word for word, but at a distance they took on different meanings. They personified, they embodied the father and the savior of the country. These optical illusions were successful, heavily advertised, and adroitly timed just after the death of Lincoln. The president endorsed them, and General Grant wrote a testimonial. Others copied Swander's work and augmented it with motifs derived from other prints. The process of accretion reached an extreme during the centennial. The writing master Daniel T. Ames placed the two portraits inside the documents in a complex composition celebrating the growth and prosperity of America, its origins on one side, its accomplishments on the other. Ames juxtaposed a rustic village and a bustling city, Bunker Hill and Gettysburg, a slave auction and a school for African Americans, a hand press and a steam press, a man on horseback and the Transcontinental Railroad. Above all this, the title extends across a frontage view of the main building of the Centennial Exhibition, an impressive vantage point for viewing American arts and manufactures. This patriotic diptych was not so much a gimmick as a tour de force. You can see a similar accumulation of patriotic imagery in this triumphal arch, or if you wish, a revolutionary city portal. An amateur artist, Joseph Leeds, sold it on subscription to raise money for a historic district in Independence Square. Leeds claimed that it took him 6 years to design it, and that the engraver labored for 18 months to implement his ideas. He credited the engraving to the American Banknote Company, a firm renowned for the intricate detail of its artwork in stock certificates and paper currency. Banknote engravers excelled in the minutiae of ornament and lettering, skills highly prized in the Declaration business. Leeds, Binns, Tyler, and Trumbull hired members of that profession to attain the desired accuracy and precision in their prints. In theory, photography would produce the most reliable reproductions, untainted by the intervention of an artist. Government officials worried about the deterioration of the engrossed parchment and approved a project to make a new, totally truthful reproduction for posterity. In 1873, they authorized a facsimile by the Washington, D.C. photolithographer Norris Peters. Here is the authentication statement by the Secretary of the Interior and the Commissioner of Patents, who allowed Peters to make the facsimile directly from the original. Like Binns and Tyler, Peters gained access to the engrossed parchment and obtained a government certificate vouching for the accuracy of his work. He had won the confidence of those officials because he was an adroit and successful lobbyist, always on the lookout for a lucrative contract from the patent office and other government departments. A bon vivant bachelor, he cultivated friends in high places and entertained them grandly at dinner parties and yachting excursions on the Potomac. He was appointed a primary examiner in the patent office despite that conflict of interest. A Chicago gossip columnist called him one of the most eccentric and mysterious characters of the national capital. Peters installed state-of-the-art photographic equipment in a top-secret manufacturing facility. But even with high-tech cameras, he and his technicians could not overcome the fundamental illegibility of the engrossed parchment. They gave up on the original signatures and resorted to reproductions in the State Department facsimile. They retouched the text wherever they thought it would not print properly, standard practice in their business. They altered punctuation in at least 20 places and omitted the interlinear correction only in the phrase answered only by repeated injury. At first, nobody noticed the defects in this facsimile. During the centennial, it circulated widely in newspapers after being pirated by a New York electrotyping firm. I've not tried to trace the electrotype version systematically, but I've found it here and there in magazines, as well as patriotic giveaways sponsored by the John Hancock Mutual Life Insurance Company. You can see how declaration publishers stole images and ideas from one another in a race to the bottom. If I may, I'll show you one more example to summarize what I'm trying to say about the rise and fall of this patriotic art form. Hands down, the Centennial Memorial was the most ingenious, least expensive, and best publicized mass market product in the Declaration business. It was printed and reprinted so many times with so many variations in price, size, and layout that I cannot account for all the commutations and permutations. The credit for this merchandising triumph goes to James D. McBride. A printmaker by profession, he got his start by selling autographs, originals as well as reproductions. He had been a lieutenant colonel in the Union Army and was later breveted a brigadier general for gallant and meritorious achievements. He used the courtesy title when dealing with politicians who sponsored his printmaking ventures. He was a consummate Washington insider, capable of persuading 400 government dignitaries to sign a document commemorating the centennial. They signed it in a series of ceremonies: the president and the cabinet in the White House, the Supreme Court justices in the old Senate chamber, the senators in the vice president's chamber, and the representatives in the speaker's room. He failed to sell the manuscript to Congress, but succeeded in marketing a print version adorned with departmental seals to certify the authenticity of the signatures and a symbolic border featuring flags and the American eagle. The same border figures in his Centennial Memorial as if to signal the brand identity of his product line. McBride planned his marketing campaign well in advance. He formed 2 dummy corporations, one in Philadelphia, the other in New York. Both companies offered his facsimile in 2 sizes, a regular edition and a larger premium version. Both put a price on the premium version, but here's the catch. If you bought it in Philadelphia, you paid $1. But if you rode off to New York, you paid half that price. I believe that McBride devised that pricing strategy to exploit the excitement of the centennial, confident he could overcharge tourists who bought souvenirs on the spot. To my mind, he personifies the hucksterism of the Declaration business. But that's not all. He sold advertising space in the regular edition to merchants who used it as a promotional giveaway. I've seen variant issues of that edition carrying advertisements for clothing, hosiery, housewares, hardware, cabinetry, fertilizer, woolens, curtains, carpets, medicines, newspapers, liquor, railway travel, and fire insurance. A wide variety of goods and services provided by firms based in 14 cities on the eastern seaboard and as far west as St. Louis and Detroit. Distributed throughout the country, these freebies also advertised the mail-order premium version suitable for framing. Independence Hall was his base of operations during the centennial. He played a part in a dispute about displaying the engrossed parchment in that location. A committee of prominent Philadelphians proposed to show it in the place where it had been debated, adopted, and signed. The Secretary of the Interior and the Commissioner of Patents resisted that idea because they had planned to put it in the government building on the exhibition grounds on the other side of town. They viewed it as government property and wanted to make it a centerpiece at the fair. The Philadelphians argued in vain until General McBride paid a call on President Grant and persuaded him to intervene. No doubt McBride had boasting rights about his role in the affair and found ways of using it to his advantage. He was allowed to set up a booth in the grandstand at Independence Hall where passers-by could buy copies of the Declaration to take away as souvenirs. The crowd around the grandstand was so large and boisterous that it drowned out Richard Henry Lee, grandson and namesake of the signer, when he was called upon to read the parchment out loud during the July 4th festivities. Stage fright aside, he could barely read the faded manuscript in a frame hard to hold with one hand while making the requisite rhetorical gestures with the other. The frame seems to be teetering on the table perilously close to the balustrade. A precarious moment in the centennial celebrations at Independence Hall. This is a good place to stop and consider how the fate of our founding document was influenced by prints and printmakers. Never again would it be exposed to the dangers of a public performance. The organizers of the Philadelphia bicentennial celebrations had to settle for a specially printed facsimile unveiled by First Lady Betty Ford. At one point, the guardians of the parchment were so concerned about its condition that they took it off display and locked it in a safe out of sight for 30 years. Now you can see it behind bulletproof glass in a helium-filled case stored in an underground vault at night. The parchment may have been in poor condition before it came into the hands of the facsimilists, but they made it worse. Binns and Tyler are more to blame than William Stone. Ironically, their injurious copying methods produced copies that are now the only reliable records of the original. Nonetheless, Binns, Tyler, Trumbull, and McBride deserve credit for promoting the iconic status of the Declaration, even while making it an article of commerce to be bought and sold. Print publishers convinced their customers that it was a precious document and that it could be an art object decorated to their taste and priced within their means. Print publishers taught Americans how to read the Declaration, how to discern its purpose, how to stand back, take a good look, and visualize a defining moment in the history of this nation. Thank you.
So we have time for a few questions. If there are questions from the audience, just raise your hand. We'll bring the microphone to you so that people who are enjoying this remotely will be able to hear the conversation as well.
The first examples were from 1818. There wasn't any decorative versions prior to that?
It depends on what you define as decorative. So There were, in 1816, letterpress broadsides with decorative borders. I believe that, again, this was an attempt to capitalize on Binz's advertising. So there are no illustrations, but it was decorative in as much as you had the sort of abstract ornament, and it was suitable for framing. So 1816 is when it really begins.
Oh.
Books and books have been written on this topic. It's above my pay grade, but I could recommend the cultural history of Pauline Maier, who explains how Americans really looked at the Declaration just as a legislative document, as almost a document in diplomacy, before really looking for it as an expression of national ideals. So there's this long transition. I believe that John Binz gets a lot of the credit for suddenly making Americans think that this was a precious document.
Sorry.
John, I'm curious what you, if you've had a chance to study 20th century printings, commemorative printings of the Declaration, you know, the ones that we have hung on, I hung on my wall when I was a kid, you know, the crispy,
Yes.
you know, printings, and how that has become a kind of a cultural icon in a way too, and a material icon. You know, it was also made famous in National Treasure, you know, buying it in the gift shop, you know.
Absolutely.
So,
I remember visiting the Monticello gift shop where you could get an imitation parchment declaration with a feather quill just to drive home the point. So yes, there's been a huge business in that to this day. I mean, you can go to the National Archives website and there's a whole selection of different declarations at different price points that you can get depending on how much ornament in the wooden frame.
I'd like to kind of follow up on the question about the sort of like paratextual illustrations. And the point of contrast that I keep thinking of is the Constitution, which, as far as I know, doesn't seem to be reprinted with that. But instead, it's actually printed as a pocket copy that you can carry around. It's printed to be read, not to be beheld or seen. I'm not sure what the question there is, but there's something about sort of how and why, to the point where some of what you showed, actually the text is impossible to read because you're so distracted by these sort of portraits and flags and eagles. What does it say about the sort of difference between these documents, that one seems to be reprinted for the purposes for reading and the other is to be displayed or beheld?
Well, I've wondered about this too. And you are right that the Constitution does not get allegories, it doesn't get patriotic emblems. Sometimes you can see the three words with the flourish, we the people. And everybody can recognize that, but nothing beyond that. Why not? Well, a graphic designer would say, well, you can't fit the Constitution in one frame to hang on your wall. And so that's a problem from the get-go.
Hello. So this might be out of the scope of your study, but I'm curious to see, for other countries that were inspired by our Declaration of Independence, have they also had this kind of like resurgence of printings and commemorations as the years have gone by? In the same way with the decorative details.
To some degree, I'm thinking when you want to create an artifact, something that's to be treasured. For example, the French did amazing vellum printed editions of their first constitution, the Louis XVI Constitution. And those were definitely intended to be collectibles at that time. I'm trying to think of other declarations. Well, you know, one of the most interesting one, I think, is the Irish Revolution. So the declaration there, compared to our Dunlap broadside, is the worst piece of printing you could possibly imagine. Battered type, terrible paper. You could almost imagine it was done amidst a battle. So in a way, it sort of communicates the passion of the Irish Revolution. But as a graphic arts object, it is nothing.
Thanks so much, John. Great to hear about your work. I know you've been working on this topic for a number of decades. Is that true?
Christine, to say this properly, off and on.
Right. I do have
my
a follow-up.
colleague Christine Nelson from the Morgan Library and Museum knows that I had done an article on this and the Proceedings of the American Antiquarian Society in 1988. And that article had 45 declarations. And so in some ways, doing the book was an act of contrition for having done that article.
Well, research methods have come a long way since you got started, and so we're here to celebrate the Revolutionary City portal. And I just wondered what you found in the institutions that are represented in that portal. Have you had a chance to dig around in the library company and the APS and the other participants in this project?
Christine, Philadelphia is the go-to place for this. So Independence National Historical Park has unique declarations. The Library Company of Philadelphia has Binz's plate. How cool is that? University of Pennsylvania has salesmen's advertising for people who wanted to learn about the biographies of the signers. A fascinating business model, how you would sell these books about people curious about the biographies of the signers. American Philosophical Society, I mentioned the Daniel Webster gift of the paper copy, which is, again, fascinating. So anywhere you turn in the city, there's going to be declaration material.
And you'll see it all next year in 2026. If I can, since I have the microphone, let me ask one question. Now that you've been living with declarations for so long, do you have a favorite?
Oh, interesting question. I guess the McBride, just because it's the most complicated and because it's such an interesting story about merchandising. I spared you a lot more about McBride's to and fro with government officials. At one point, a congressman got up and denounced McBride for distorting American history and actually had to ask permission from the Speaker of the House for extra time. I guess that's the protocol when you give a speech in the House, you're given so much time. He said, I don't have enough time to talk about how bad McBride is. So Christine mentioned online resources, which of course I did not have back when I did the article. And you can look at government docs online, and James D. McBride just comes up over and over again. I just had so much fun working with this guy. So I guess that's my answer to your question. It was a fun research project.
Well, I hope you will all join me in thanking this evening's speaker for a wonderful presentation. We do have copies of his book available in the back of the room if you'd like to buy them and learn more. But I'm sure that his presentation has whet your appetite, not only for this book, but also for everything that will be coming within the next 18 months of Philadelphia's history. Thank you so much.